So good morning, everyone. This is an honor to be here. I'm Gail Brewer, City Council member, and we have a phenomenal panel and obviously a great audience, and with the number one topic in New York, which is housing. So I wanted to just say a couple of things that will be amplified by these amazing panelists. But we have obviously a housing crisis, and we'll talk about the work that Open Hearts has done to help those who are homeless. But right now, one of the challenges, of course, is just how do we get, and we're just on a finance committee, that's why I had my earplugs in, talking about the budget, because that's what's going on in the city right now. And obviously, we're trying to figure out how to make sure that we have permanent housing, which is a challenge in itself. The city is under the current mayor, and his executive budget hasn't passed with the city council's amendments until the end of the month. But we have stabilization beds, we have safe haven beds, and what we really want are permanent housing. We have 350 buildings with shelter units in the homeless system. We have 50,000 individuals who use shelters every single day. Obviously, we have lots of children with families. The executive budget did add, this is under the mayor, $140 million for this either stabilization or safe haven beds. I hope the city council adds even more, but even getting them online takes time. 2023, 2024, and even if we end up with what the mayor suggests and maybe the city council, it's maybe 1,400, 1,500. It is so far from what we need. I think we all know that when people are in the system, sometimes they stay as singles 483 days, 520 days if a family, and 773 days for adult families. And I think we also know that every single night there are tens of thousands doing all of this. I want to mention a couple of things that are happening in Albany, a bill that we're all very supportive of. The hotels that are vacant have been supported for conversion to permanent supportive housing with nonprofits by the mayor, the governor, the Hotel Trades Council, which is the union, and the bill passed the Senate because in order to convert, you can't just wake up in the morning and say, I want to do this. You actually need legislation to go from hotel to stabilization. And without getting into all the semantics, one hell of a challenge to get this bill through the assembly. But the good news is, as we speak, it is in Ways and Means, which is the step to get it to become law, and Friday is the deadline. It's not like we have another 2 weeks or a week. It's Friday is the deadline. So many of us have been making phone calls, writing letters, et cetera. That would give us a little bit of a window of units. During the last administration, toward the end, there were a couple of hotels. One, you hear more about Project Renewal, a wonderful organization, another one with Breaking Ground, and they were not, even though they had all the financing and the building and the community support, they would not be able to convert because this legislation had not passed. So when you get into the granular, it is very, very frustrating. I don't need to tell you how inadequate our shelter system is and the lack of permanent housing. I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room. So I'm here to say the good news, because we need good news, is that Open Hearts, as an organization, I first met when this amazing man, and you'll hear more, with the support of Project Renewal, moved to 79th Street. A lot of international press. My community, unfortunately, was not open and willing to work with them, and there was a lot of consternation and racist comments. When people step in, neighbors, and work with individuals, it's such a pleasant, positive step. And we hope that this model that you'll hear more about is something that can be replicated with other situations. So this is unusual. That's why you're here today, to hear about what replication worked, but what happened that was so positive in this situation. I'm going to introduce each person as they come up, and then we'll take questions because we have lots of great time. So we're going to start with Olivia Killingsworth, Open Hearts Initiative volunteer, Upper West Sider actress, and has made such a difference as part of this organization, and we look forward to hearing from you, Olivia. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks for being here. One thing I want to mention also is that I am also a former supportive housing tenant. Shout out if anybody's here. Y'all know the Skirmahorn in downtown Brooklyn. Shout out Breaking Ground, Actors Fund, CUCS. So I ended up, my situation changed and I moved to the Upper West Side in 2019, right before the pandemic happened. And around the time in 2020 when this gentleman here and his neighbors were being moved to the Lucerne on 79th Street on the Upper West Side, I first became aware of some of the backlash that Gail mentioned. And I found out about a sort of a fledgling group that was started by a couple of amazing Upper West Side ladies and gentlemen called the Open Hearts Initiative. Although I think at that point they hadn't even come up with a name for themselves. They were just trying to counter some of the backlash that they were seeing in the neighborhood, which, I mean, frankly, in the summer right after the murder of George Floyd, when we were having this big conversation as a country about what people with privilege needed to do to stand up for those who maybe had different circumstances, it felt like, you know, those of us who might normally in another situation would have sat by and went like, oh, what about those cranks on Facebook? I think people were just kind of like, no, we need to be more vocal, we need to be more public, we need to be more visible. So this group of folks, Corinne Low, Candace Braun, Amanda Fialk, and a whole bunch of other folks got together and started organizing, you know, little events, just chalking, writing on sidewalk chalk outside the hotel, saying, you know, you're welcome, we appreciate you, we want you here. They put together little welcome kits, you know, with little toiletries and snacks. And Corinne told me she even walked right in to the hotel and spoke to some of the staff and said, you know, what do y'all need? And she organized an Amazon wish list that folks from the community could order things to be delivered directly to the hotel for the residents there. And around that time is when they started to meet Shams and some of the other residents there and started to kind of have a dialogue with them about, you know, how can we help? What can we do? How can we work together? So it sort of grew organically. You know, first it was just chalking and doing these little things. Then there were these Zoom calls, a petition to let the mayor and elected officials know that there were people in the neighborhood who supported the gentleman staying there. We had a little Facebook group. And then we started doing even bigger things. We organized free stores. We organized AA meetings to happen at Project Renewal at the location, soulful walk and talks around the community with faith leaders. And when the mayor finally started to cave to some of the louder voices in the neighborhood and said, well, I'm going to move them all to Midtown, or I'm going to move them to another hotel downtown, we were able to sort of mobilize and have this big campaign to try to bring public pressure against the mayor and against the city administration not to pick these guys up in the middle of the pandemic and move them, because it wasn't necessary. We did a march on Gracie Mansion. So I think what's unique about this group is that from the very beginning, we tried to organize out of solidarity with our unhoused neighbors, that we're working together, housed and unhoused people, working with each other, not like us just showing up and doing stuff for you or on your behalf or speaking on your behalf. I mean, we're definitely those of us with privilege showing up and we're using it, but we're also trying to be in solidarity and in dialogue with those who are directly impacted. And, you know, even though these sort of little chalking and free store events might seem like they may not have much of an impact, they've been really, really vital to us as an organization, because that's where we build community and make connections with people, with both our unhoused neighbors, and also, with each other as house people, and sort of strike up dialogues and have conversations. A lot of the folks who showed up to volunteer at these free stores and never really, or even to walk with us to Gracie Mansion, had never really gotten involved in activism before. But they saw what was going on in their neighborhood. They didn't want to be quiet, and so they showed up. And these kinds of events gave them a way to sort of take concrete action. And Sara will talk more about how we've expanded since then. So that now we're trying to meet with folks like y'all before a place even gets cited, or before, once it's cited and before it gets opened, so that we can try to build, because I think one of the things we recognized was missing with the Lucerne was to build connection and a welcoming atmosphere in the community beforehand. Obviously, it was the middle of the pandemic. It's an emergency situation. There was only so much that could be done. But we saw that. We saw the backlash, and we were like, it's probably going to happen everywhere, but what can we do to give elected officials and community board members and providers the support that they need to know that, the folks who are going to show up and say, not in my backyard, don't represent everybody in the community. And that there are plenty more of us who have no problem with this, and in fact, want to welcome folks into our community who are in shelters or in supportive housing. So now we're continuing to sort of work on that dual track of doing these events to meet people's material immediate needs and advocacy for immediate needs, right? To stop sweeps and get shelters approved, but also working on longer term advocacy and meeting with offices like Gail's to push for the kinds of legislation that Gail was just talking about, pushing for more supportive housing and more housing in general, because we know ultimately that's the solution, right? And I don't have to tell any of you in this room that that's the solution. So, thank you very much.
So I wander around on streets, and I remember I was on 79th Street. The Lucerne had become an issue, but I wasn't paying attention. I ran into this really nice man. I didn't know who the hell he was. He was just smiling. He was friendly. I had no idea. I had no idea he was going to become a celebrity. And he was just pleasant. So I remember then, in addition to Open Hearts, there were also meetings in the building, particularly trying to organize with the other residents of the building, not just about figuring out this moving situation, which was really outrageous, but just concerns. And he was a leader, the next person I'll introduce, but more importantly, whether it was Larry, who was another leader, he cared about the other residents. It wasn't about him, it was about the residents in general. And I think to me, that's the making of a leader, somebody who is there for the people whom he represents or she represents. So, and then of course, but I kept thinking, that's a nice guy I met on 79th Street and Broadway. So DaBaron is also known as a homeless hero. He grew up in South Bronx. He'll tell you about foster care and homeless and his family. But he's also a filmmaker, was in Atlanta for a while, working on a TV series, has done work in the hip hop community. And obviously, I think because you read about him, you've heard about his leadership in terms of the homeless and the Lucerne, and the work that he did with Open Hearts, he will talk to you about. But I want to also say that most recently, he was appointed to the board of Project Renewal, which was the organization that had the contract for the Lucerne. And Project Renewal is very fortunate. We're all fortunate to have somebody with his capacity to be able to be a leadership in that situation. So I'm here to say thank you to DaBaron and to introduce you to the nice guy, DaBaron. Thank you very much.
I didn't even know. I didn't know we were going to speak. Somebody should have told me that. Where do I start? Let's start with, if anybody doesn't have a problem with this, can I see by a show of hands anyone who has been homeless in the room? That's good to know. So, sometimes people tell me to start with, let me just say. My name is DaBaron, a.k.a. the homeless hero. The simple thing is, I grew up in foster care since the age of 2. Started experiencing homelessness at the age of 10 and was permanently discharged into the streets at the age of 12. So, everything wasn't gloom and doom. I was an academic star and also a pioneer of hip-hop culture. I've done a lot of great things, but I've done a few bad things too. But as I entered adulthood and started having children, I was a parent, and I took care of my children and became a single parent in the family shelter system with my son, who I had custody of. I spent many years on and off being homeless, working to prevent my children from being homeless, among other things. So I'm gonna start real quickly, and if someone could give me a time, because you know how I get.
I will, go ahead.
Okay. Let me start with a trigger warning. Does anybody have a problem with the truth? No, some people actually do, so I want to make sure. Because I don't want anybody to get upset. But I like to try and keep it real. So first, let me start with saying this. The person known as the homeless hero started during the pandemic when we were in shelters, congregate shelters, actually Project Renewal Shelter. And during the height of the pandemic, the very early days, it was so dangerous in the shelter system. I've never seen the type of fear that I saw amongst men who have survived so many hostile environments, prison, streets, etc. We were all fearful of this virus because we understood that in those environments it's so easy to get sick. But this was not the flu. This was something that if you got it, we were seeing that you more than likely you're gonna die. Many of us have what they call the underlying conditions, diabetes, hypertension. You know, when they talked about the racial inequities and the disparities, you know that the diet was something that came up. Because a lot of black people and brown people, most of us that are the descendant of slaves, you know, some of us still continue those slave diets, or those diets that we had on the plantations. And so we suffer from certain diseases that maybe don't afflict the general population or other people. And so when we got sick, we got sick. And this was a time when there was no testing, there was no antibody testing, and it was hard to even get in hospitals. So in my particular shelter, I was already seeing people die from overdoses all the time, and that was traumatizing. You talk to somebody 1 minute, and the next minute they're dead when they go use the bathroom and they shoot up. I walked into a drug den. That's what those shelters were. people getting beat up for nothing. If you were an immigrant and didn't know your way around, they beat you up, take advantage. And I said, I'm going to change that because I can't live around that stuff. And so I started, long before there was an Open Hearts, long before there was a Lucerne, before there was even a thought of putting us in hotels, to try and change the environment where I lived. And I started first by changing myself. I said, Shams, you have to be a reflection of what you want to see. And so when I started talking to other people, I started talking to them with love and compassion. And pretty soon I got them to change certain behaviors. They wasn't going to stop using drugs, I'm going to tell you that right now. But they didn't have to do it all in the open. And they can do things to try and check and make sure that no one overdosed. And so it was from that trauma of seeing all of this in that type of environment that I kind of started to push to do something to change it. I studied the CDC website to figure out what they required, because that wasn't told to us, in terms of social distancing and stuff like that, and protocols to get us out of there into quarantine. And we started pushing for that. We ended up in the hotel, first the Washington Jefferson, 51st Street. And let me push back a little bit. In my work, I was engaging people, and there was a brother that was sent from prison because they was depopulating the prison to protect them. But unfortunately, I don't know who thought of this, but they sent them to congregate hotels. And it was someone who was sick coming from prison who I got the virus from. And I don't know if you know this, but 3 days in, I almost died in a quarantine site run by Housing Works, my good friend Charles King. And I almost died, and it was there that I once I came around, I like to say I rose like a phoenix. I vowed that I was gonna go back and change things and really fight, and I wouldn't waste a moment. So when we got to the Washington Jefferson, it was a better environment for us in terms of our living space. But there was one thing I knew that was lacking, and that was the idea of providing much needed services to those of us who were residing in there. And so obviously the community changed a little bit, and I started to see the same stuff that I saw on 3rd Street over there in Hell's Kitchen. And it was when we got the notice that we would be transferred to the Lucerne that I went and I started talking to the West Side Rag. And I told them, I was trying to hide because that's where the homeless hero comes from. I didn't want to use my name because in those days, under de Blasio and Steve Banks, if you spoke out, you get retaliated against. And a lot of times they send you to places like far, far Rockaway. You wouldn't be heard from again. So I developed the name of the homeless hero to represent all homeless New Yorkers, but also so they wouldn't know who it was that was talking. But in the West Side Rag, I did indicate that moving us to another hotel is not gonna change anything. I said that eventually we would adjust to that environment, and the same behavior you see in other places is gonna follow us. The problem, I said in that particular article, was that we don't have services on site. And so when I speak about truth, I want to be truthful with you. When we moved, I was glad to see the opposition Oh, I was glad, let me tell you. When I saw the opposition, I said, woo-wee. Now I could get this thing rolling. Because a lot of what they said was true. A lot of their concerns were legit. I mean, damn. The mayor moved so quick under pressure, didn't think this thing through, the then mayor, and dropped us off in there, didn't engage the community at all. And then said, look, go back to what they said. We're gonna drop 283 people struggling with addiction and mental illness. That is not true. All of us didn't do that. That was a small minority. And the people at Project Renewal knew exactly who they was, and they never wanted to be placed into a hotel. But the way the city operated, they didn't give a damn about us, and they didn't give a damn about the community. So when the community rose up, I said, I'm gonna use that to my advantage. And this is before open hearts. Because I don't want you to think, what is it, the cart before the horse or the whatever. No. This ain't no white saviorism. Because it took a lot for me to stand up and fight. I ain't no damn activist. I'm not no advocate. I'm a person who care about my people. So I stood up with no money, no backing, no nothing. And I didn't give a damn what they did. So let's be real with this and let's tell the truth. I told Project Renewal, listen to what I'm telling you if you want to fix this. I want services on site in this hotel. And I brought in the Recovery Center. TRC, the Recovery Center, is the outpatient unit that from Project Renewal. Now for some, I hope I'm being respectful, but for some silly reason, you have a shelter and you have a provider that provides shelter on one end and can provide outpatient services on another, but yet there's no synergy. When I go into the recovery center for treatment for my alcohol, once I leave, I step into the shelter. And what ended up happening is I get offered all types of liquor, beer, everything. I said, well, what the hell is this? How the hell am I gonna stay sober? So they keep these things separate, I'm assuming because of where the funding comes from. I don't know. But I know that that's a problem. So they wanted us, and mind you, anyone who wants treatment, you're gonna have to swipe your Medicaid. You have to want it. It's not just there for you. And it's not on site in these traditional congregate shelters. So I said, bring it to the hotel. Open up the penthouse. Remember? You helped get that penthouse open. We opened up the penthouse and we began to put the services there, first starting with the recovery center who brought the harm reduction. And the difference between how it was done in the Lucerne, talking about the model, is in the Lucerne, it was open to all 283 residents. On 3rd Street, there's about 20 of us that go there, and that's it. And people from across the city. So now we were able to access services without swiping a card for more people. So I'm a wrap. So when so we get this thing going, and this is all in real time. One of the main problems we had was the media. Oh, that media, they were brutal. I know y'all be looking now and say, oh, but they seem to love you today. But no, not then. The media came. I mean, I seen us in The Guardian. in the Daily Mail. I mean, we were all over the world. And the crazy thing is, they had us listed as pedophiles, as vagrants, as criminals. They said that we were running prostitution out of the hotel. I mean, they said a lot of what the New York Post called us scum. That was the headline. I can't express to you how hurtful it was to see homeless New Yorkers portrayed like that. And the craziest thing was that most of the pictures they would show weren't even us. It was street homeless people. I mean, why the hell we in a 5-star hotel, we gonna go in the street to take a crap? Makes no sense at all. Like, what the hell? But this is what we had to see every day. And we walked out, there was a big guy there, we called him Biggs. This guy's 6-something. Y'all remember Biggs? Big guy, did a lot of prison time. And every day he walked out, it was a guy who saw him from the community who called him the N-word. Every day, it was just a ritual between him and this guy from the community. And Biggs he was getting himself together, he started using drugs harder. And I used to have to go get him from the Broadway Medium to bring him up to the penthouse. And he would break down crying. And his whole thing was that, I don't want to go to jail no more. I don't want to hurt nobody. I don't know how to deal with this. And they end up moving Biggs. And it might have been good for him or might have been bad for him, but it hurts that my fellow residents had to go through this. And so even when it was hard for me, I had to keep on. But the media was really, really the enemy to begin with. And so I understood something about narrative then. As a documentarian and filmmaker, I know a little something about stories. And I said, this story is being told wrong. The mayor's not telling it right. The people's not telling it. No one's telling it right. There has to be a hero in this story, a protagonist in this story. I still didn't want to speak publicly, I'll tell you that. But eventually, it was kind of like out the bag. And there was these ladies that came, walked out, and I saw all this stuff writing on the floor. And I thought it was the people that didn't want us there, and I thought that was a little too far. So I started complaining, saying, what the hell is this, man? These people is crazy, right? And trust me, the whole beef between the Westco and Open Hearts, that's worse than the Bloods and Crips. Trust me when I tell you, I'm from the streets too. But when the security guard explained to me that, no, some ladies came by with their kids earlier, and they, were painting, they would welcome you. I was like, what? I said, read it. And I'm reading, and I see, welcome to the community. We love you. This and that. I said, what the hell? Because I didn't see that first. I think they did something that I didn't know about. But this is the first time I'm seeing the presence of Open Hearts. And so I run upstairs, and I go Google this group. And I find a little website, I believe, and I sent the email. And I was trying to be nice. I was trying to be nice. It was meant to be nice, but the whole other side of me came out, I guess. And I said, wait, look, we appreciate this, but chalk on the floor ain't enough for us. We need more than that. And within minutes, I got a reply that said, oh, thank God we're able to meet one of you guys, and can we sit down and we definitely want to hear from you. I said, what? And within minutes, I was meeting with Amanda, and we met on Broadway, and in less than 15 minutes, Amanda said, I made my request. I said, we need services on site. I didn't know what they could offer. I didn't know nothing like that. And they would explain it was just a bunch of mothers that got together. But Amanda said, well, a lot of us are practitioners, we're social workers, we deal in this space, we're psychiatrists, we're, we can actually offer those services. And we would do it free of charge. And knowing how the city work, I thought that might be a good thing to hear. And so I said, okay. And I walked away there like, nah, this can't be real. I went back to Project Renewal and I said to them, whatever you do, always, because it's a lot of red tape that goes when you want to bring people into the building. You can't just do that because of HIPAA laws and other things, and certain people have to be certified. And Gail, you was a part of all this. You made a lot of that stuff easy. But we were in a crisis, and we wanted to do something, and this was something that I hope you're reading between the line, between the engagement and collaboration of community, from the elected officials to concerned community members, to the actual residents and the provider. That's what was coming together in real time. And so I said, well, bring them into the building. Whatever you got to do, make it happen. And they connected with TRC, and Carly helped to facilitate that and make it an easy thing with the support of Eric Rosenbaum from Project Renewal and Jody, who was there at the time. And so when they came in, one of the most brilliant things that they did was they said, what do y'all need? They didn't come in saying, this is what we're going to do for you. They asked what we're going to need. And from that conversation, it wasn't me talking. It was other people talking. The Soulful Walking Talks came because of another resident. And other things came. The AA meeting came because of another resident. But I can tell you that when we brought Open Hearts in and we began to really put robust services in there, you didn't see people on that Broadway medium. We were able to stabilize a lot of people. We end up getting the jobs program. We end up getting a major donation. We could have had more had the mayor worked with the community. And I always say this, for anyone who talks about the other side of the community, because they always say that the community was bad, and that's a falsehood. That's a falsehood. And how you do it, measure it by the math. Gail, how much money was raised by Westco to get us out the community?
A lot, I don't know, they hired
Like
lawyers.
$135,000, $50,000.
They had full-time lawyers too.
That's right. So now, how much money was donated to us in total?
It was before my time, but
I'll tell you, the first donation, and it'll bring your memories back, because you was part of that.
And then got
It was $250,000 from a couple, anonymous donation. And then God at Riverside brought in another $200,000. We have $500,000 against their $135,000 to $50,000. So that I just want to say that to let you know the value of that community and how that community did mobilize for us. That was a small segment of the population. Now let me wrap this up. All right. So I'm sorry, y'all. So all of that was great, but it was a hell of a fight. And one of the things I said, I'm not fighting NIMBYism. That was small to me. The bigger battle was with the mayor. The mayor had the power. The mayor made the decisions. And what triggered me, and when I say triggered, it's what you think. What triggered me was this mayor, de Blasio, saying that he came to the Upper West Side. He drove through, and what he saw was not acceptable. I get emotional even as I speak of it. And what triggers me is the thought of how we were described during the days of slavery. The thought of how we were described during so-called Reconstruction to continuously oppress us and justify that oppression. What triggered me was how we were described when they destroyed Seneca Village. He said we're not acceptable. And I say that because we're talking about 90% of those being black and brown. This mayor, that mayor rather, said that we are not acceptable. The leader of the city. And this is a time when this Upper West Sider for Safer Street Facebook hate group was saying that they wanted to form a militia to eradicate us from the community. When they said that we want to get chemical weapons to attack them, I would look at their posts and say, Jesus, this is some old white lady. What the hell she want to, like, what the hell? These people crazy for real. And they would say, they were contemplating, they were like sharing information, saying, we're gonna get bug spray. So they were going saying, let's do hornet spray, and what was the other one? Hairspray. And they just was like, some of them knew the science of it. They was like, if you use the hornet spray, you could stand a distance, pop them in the eye, and got enough time to run away. I said, this is crazy. They were quoting the Constitution, all types of stuff, just to get rid of the men of the Lucerne. And so the mayor follows up, and he says, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna get rid of them, because they are not acceptable. I've never been so hurt from the failure of the city than in that moment. I didn't care about the racist talk online. I didn't care about that. As long as they kept that online, I didn't care. But for the leader of the city to act in that way was atrocious. And so it is because of that when Open Hearts and other activists, including those from the Harmonia Hotel, decided to do a march on Gracie Mansion, I decided to march with them, which would reveal who the homeless hero was. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be in the cameras. Believe me, I didn't want to be in the cameras. But Corinne, I don't think Corinne was going to have it any other way. As soon as I stepped there, she passed me the mic. And so I spoke. And I spoke what I say is truth to power, because I didn't care about me no more. Not at all. I didn't care about my TV deal. I didn't care about my history in hip hop. I didn't care about none of that. The only thing that mattered to me was reversing all of these negative things that had happened for so many years, that have been unaddressed, and that have negatively impacted our city all across the board. And I'm glad that I did that, because I wouldn't be with you today had I not. And you don't know this, but there are so many people who have benefited that I never would talk about, who, when I see them in the streets and they say, Shams, thank you. Thank you. Because of you, I'm in a home. That matters. Because of you, I'm in recovery. That matters to me. So I just want to say that, and I'm rapping. What I want to see moving forward is we have to understand the power of narrative. Right now, there's a bad narrative that is being projected. It has been projected. And as much as we're trying to change that, it still exists. We have to change the narrative that is being projected as to what homelessness is about, who is homeless, what are the faces of homelessness, what are the causes of homelessness. And we have to show that you could be that person who, like me, was on the park bench, on the subways, on the train, with my beer bottle. You could be that, but you can rise from that. You can be the guy who once contemplated suicide and just wanted to give up, but went and got some help and rose up from that. You can go from all that to hanging out with Gail Brewer, to hanging out with the mayor. Jeez, I'm hanging with the mayor too? What? And to having great friends like Open Hearts. That wasn't just them, doing chalk and stuff. I go in their homes. I eat with them. I spend time with them and their children. Like, we're all real friends. We have to change that narrative and show that we can lift people up and make this a better city, a better environment for us all.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much, James. Before I introduce Sara Newman, who's Director of Organizing at Open Hearts Initiative, I just want to pick up on one tiny piece because there were so many. One is, when we're talking about replication, another factor that irritated me, I too will not use a bad word, would be when the mayor didn't move quickly enough on the Goddard Riverside opportunity, because we were able to get jobs for some of the men, but it was towards the end of their stay at the Lucerne. We could have started months in advance. And he did not move on it. He would not let that money be spent. He would not allow that opportunity to exist. Outrageous. And then second, the community organization, again, every community has organizations like this, had space that they would offer for day programs and, scratch food and fun things to do, and an outdoor space and a garden and so on. And the mayor would never allow us to move on that. So it just, all of these pieces, men, persevered, leadership persevered, but it could have been so different. And that's one of the messages. But great Sara Newman, Director of Organizing at the Open Hearts Initiative. She has worked in the City Council, I remember. She's also worked at a public relations firm. She does oral history, which I love. And she also teaches language at Riverside Language. And she's a Columbia University grad. I give you Sara Newman.
Thanks so much. It's always hard to follow Shams as a speaker, but I think we actually have a video that I am going to show now with just a quick overview of the growth of Open Hearts. Let's see if this works.
The nation's eyes were on New York City, up against a public health emergency not seen in a century.
The city's shelters are too crowded, so the city has been emptying its shelters, placing thousands of people in hotels to reduce the spread of the virus.
But to put them in my back door, I'm petrified.
It's not about finding a better place to put these men. It's about their rights as human beings to the same stability that those of us who are housing secure enjoy.
UWS Open Hearts have been telling us that the mass of the community here on the west side, Upper West Side, welcomes us. And they have shown that through their example. For total strangers to come out in this climate, in this time, and to show genuine love. I don't care what your experience is, that love transforms you.
kind of seeing the success of mobilizing housed neighbors in support of homeless New Yorkers on the Upper West Side, we got lots of incoming requests from other communities who said we'd like to do the same thing in our community. And so we've actually opened chapters now in 5 communities.
Well, we're putting together bags for people that are coming to shelters. I just made this card. Welcome to the neighborhood. So glad you're here.
I knew that there was potential that there are folks in every neighborhood who want to lead with compassion, who care about all neighbors regardless of housing status, and who, just need the tools and resources to push back against NIMBYism that usually dominates the conversation.
I want folks to feel like the community wants them here. I really just want people to feel welcome.
And I want to shout out our volunteer, Kate Epstein, who used her skills to make that video. And I think one thing that Shams mentioned that was so powerful about, our work at the Lucerne and the approach that we take is really trying to leverage the skills that folks in all communities have and find ways to use those skills and resources in support of homeless neighbors. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the, nitty-gritty of what we've been up to since the Lucerne and how our approach works. And I'll try to keep it short because I am, conscious of time, so feel free to cut me off if needed, Gail. So I came on in July 2021, so it's been almost a year, and I was brought on because, as Corinne mentioned in the video, we were getting a lot of requests for assistance. So, like Shams said, there was a lot of media coverage around the Lucerne. There was negative media coverage. There was also some great positive media coverage that helped amplify the work that we were doing and amplify the fact that there were supportive neighbors on the Upper West Side. And as a result of all of that coverage, a lot of people in different neighborhoods in the city knew a little bit about, what we were doing on the Upper West Side and that it seemed to be successful. And we're looking to, get insights from us and learn about what worked because they were seeing similar types of backlash in their neighborhoods. And so that's really, why we ended up expanding. So we now have 6 chapters, including our flagship Upper West Side chapter, which is still going strong. So we've got chapters in other parts of Manhattan. We've got a Lower Manhattan chapter, an Upper East Side chapter, a Midtown Manhattan chapter. We've got a chapter in the Northwest Bronx, primarily in Riverdale, and we've got a chapter in Douglaston in Queens. And these are all spots that, have folks who reached out to us. In most cases, it's just a regular person who may have heard about us and, is looking for support. In some cases, we've had, community leaders or elected officials reach out. They may know of a few folks in the community who are supportive, but are looking for guidance on how to help build that out. And so the approach that these chapters take, as I think everyone here has alluded to, is to combine mobilizing community resources in support of homeless neighbors, advocating on both a neighborhood and a citywide level for policies that would actually seek to end homelessness rather than just make it less visible to house neighbors. And, really the type of narrative shifting that's so important that Shams was talking about. In a world where the New York Post is calling homeless people scum, these are things that so many people who are housed take in every day and that really shapes their understanding of who is homeless, what homelessness looks like, what shelters are like, how someone ends up in a shelter. And so a lot of the work that we do is, helping to push back against a lot of the myths that folks have about homelessness and about homeless neighbors. So our work really combines those 3 strategies, and as Shams said, a really core part of it is that collaboration between housed and unhoused neighbors. That, in figuring out both on a hyper-local level at a given site and on a citywide level, what should we be using our voices and resources to push? That's not something that we just, come up with. That's something that, we want to make sure it's coming from folks who are directly impacted and most affected by the experience of homelessness. And so, that's the work that our chapters do, and the role that I play and that our other staff play is to provide the technical assistance and scaffolding to help support that grassroots work. So that looks like a lot of different things. That might mean, we've got a group of 20 or so people in the Northwest Bronx, for example, who heard that there was going to be a big community board meeting about a shelter coming to the neighborhood. There was a lot of pushback. They kind of instinctively knew, I don't really like the way my neighbors are talking about this. This doesn't feel right to me. This doesn't align with my values, and I want to be part of the solution and counter that type of rhetoric, but didn't necessarily know, what do I say at the community board meeting? How do I respond to some of the common talking points? So, we worked really closely with them to strategize about, what would be useful to say, building out talking points that, there are many things that are really similar in different neighborhoods in terms of the really common opposition talking points. We always hear a lot about public safety, quality of life. These are things that come up a lot. And then there are also things that are really different from neighborhood to neighborhood. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done that's really led by our chapter members to identify what are the particular specific concerns that they're hearing from their neighbors, and working together to find ways to respond to those. So that's, one approach that we often take in terms of the type of assistance that we provide. And then, as others have mentioned, another big part of the support that we offer chapters is to, help them pull off things like free stores, welcome kit events. And these are things that we see as filling, multiple purposes, right? There's the immediate purpose of we're helping to meet a material need that someone in the community has, and that, there are things that other people in the community might have that they can offer. So with, we have a free store coming up this weekend, and we've been really telling people, this one's gonna be in Lower Manhattan. This is a great spring cleaning opportunity. A lot of folks have things they want to donate. And then there are people in the community who may or may not be homeless who, have things that they might need or want. And so, part of what we do is to provide, the ideas for what would it look like to do an event like that can, provide the immediate support, but also in the longer term can be an impetus to really build relationships in the community, both between housed and unhoused neighbors, in a way that, that type of person-to-person connection, even if it's just, over a table at a free store, can really help build empathy and understanding and break down some of those myths that housed neighbors might have around homelessness, and also to build engagement in the community. That there are a lot of people, as Olivia mentioned, who may not see themselves as activists, who may not know a lot about homelessness or housing, but who want to approach these issues and their neighbors with compassion. And in some ways, the free stores and things like it can be a way that seems non-threatening and easy and accessible for people to get involved in, that actually ends up, building into something that's more about advocacy and more about changing the system that we have and advocating alongside homeless neighbors for the changes that need to be made. But a really good way in is to start with things that people feel comfortable with. And sometimes what they feel comfortable with is donating some extra clothes that they have, and maybe they'll, talk to some neighbors in the process of doing that. So that's, another key part of the approach that we take. And often our work, just because of the nature of, these narratives and the media coverage and the moments in which housed neighbors will think about and confront issues of homelessness, often our work will center around particular sites that are being planned. So, with the Lucerne, in that case, it was unusual because there wasn't really much planning. It was, just that one day this was, a de-densification hotel, and there was a lot of backlash to that, as, Shams and Olivia talked about. Now, a lot of the work that we're doing is around sites that are being planned, that are in the pipeline, and have, usually gone before the community board, obviously not for any sort of official approval, but to share information, sites that may be covered in local media, but haven't yet been opened. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing in the neighborhoods that we work in has been, working with supportive neighbors there to shift the conversation in those neighborhoods around a site that's being planned. We really, when we think about particular sites, there are obviously certain types of, shelter and transitional housing that we are more excited about than others. And I'm sure that, all of you who are, providers think a lot about, what are, kind of best practices and good models and like what works well. And like so much of what we saw with the Lucerne was how transformative it can be for folks to have, the privacy and dignity that comes with their own room, even a room with one other person, though that's not, as ideal as having your own room, and having that be part of something that's like a bigger community with services on site that folks can access if they want to, but that's never a requirement, never a precondition for having housing. And so, we're most excited about, really supporting and pushing for sites that use similar models, whether that's, on a temporary transitional basis or whether that's on a permanent basis. And unfortunately, there's really not enough of the permanent housing projects that are really out there that, we can support. But, there are also moments when there may be a shelter coming that is a congregate shelter. And so part of, what we're navigating now is, what does it look like to build, to push back against harmful myths, against NIMBYism, but also to use this as an opportunity to try to push for change in the shelter system and try to make sure that neighbors are using their power and resources to provide the kind of oversight that, people with power and resources can offer, to make sure that if a site opens and there's something about it that's not working well for the folks who are living at that site, not as much for neighbors, but for the folks living there, then making sure that there are neighbors who can amplify those needs, who can back them up when talking to a provider, when talking to the city, and who can, as Shams described, say, what is it that you need? And figure out if there are ways that community members can provide that support or help push for that support. So that's the, general model. And I want to open it up to questions. And Gail, I can hand it back to you. Perfect. Sure. I'll sit back down.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. And if there are questions, this is the time. If you want to line up at the mic so we can hear you, if you don't mind, that would be great, because we want to hear your question, and we appreciate each and every one of you being here today. Go ahead, sir. Why don't you introduce yourself if you want, but feel free to ask your question, and thank you.
Hi, my name is Antonio. My questions are for Sham mostly. First, I would say, I know that you said you don't consider yourself an activist, but the work that you do, I consider you an activist. And I like the advocacy that you did for people that had similar predicaments as you. After your journey with doing all the work that you did, do you consider yourself an activist now or no?
Well, I don't think I could get away from it like you said. So, definitely. Okay. Now, I'm gonna hold that up and accept it.
Okay, and then my second question was that you spoke about Mayor de Blasio, the former Mayor de Blasio, a lot, and you also spoke about telling the truth. My question for you is, knowing how black and brown people view politics and stuff like that, is your new challenge pushing the importance of like voting and like knowing who your elected officials are?
Oh yes, definitely. Let me tell you something. I'm like most people. As long as you don't change my food stamps amount, I don't give a damn who's in office. That's how it was. If it goes up, yeah. But what was unique was the power that I saw that the mayor had. I didn't understand how city council works or anything like that. It was great. We were great. It was great that we had so many elected officials join us and help us in the community and throughout the city. And Gail's the Manhattan Borough president, so that was important. And they all supported us. But the mayor seemed to wield so much power that it made me think, like, is this like a dictatorship? Like, he could just do this? I had no idea of how politics really worked. But we had several things working for us. I think I could say is that it was also election time. I think we had the presidential elections, and then we had our elections last year coming. So one of the things that I did do is I said, I'm starting to make some friends on that end. Let me start to mobilize. Open Hearts and us, they set up a voters registration. And to my surprise, like I think on one day, it was like 70 people got registered to vote from the Lucerne and the Belclair hotels, which I didn't expect those type of numbers. So we continued that at the free stores. But what I ended up doing, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, is one historic thing that we did was myself and Corinne Low, the co-founder of Open Hearts. We've put together the first of its kind mayoral candidate forum with homeless New Yorkers devising the questions and asking the questions. It's never happened anywhere in the United States. And we spoke and asked questions, I was just the moderator, to all of the primary mayoral candidates with the exception of Andrew Yang, who sort of got cold feet. I'm sorry, he got COVID. And we did the same with the city council meeting and a DA meeting, the Manhattan DA meeting. And all of it centered the voices of directly impacted people. And so, to your point, there is so much value in us engaging the political process, especially our local politicians. And as you could, well, if you know, one of the things I'm doing now, in the previous administration, I didn't have a seat at the table, and it was an adversarial thing with that mayor, de Blasio. In this administration, the current mayor, Eric Adams, is keeping his word that he gave us at that mayoral candidates forum, and he has allowed me and other New Yorkers, other homeless New Yorkers, impacted New Yorkers, a seat at the table. And so we're not only just there for pictures and photo ops, but we're literally there helping to craft their housing plan and engage them in a way to try and help guide the administration in a way that could be beneficial to homeless New Yorkers, housing insecure New Yorkers, and the city.
Thank you very much for your question.
I just have one question. Hi, I'm Raven. I work for People USA. We serve the Hudson Valley. But you guys are amazing. I love the work that you guys are doing. It's very inspiring. But I hear a lot that Shams was talking about how it's the people, right? The people that are unhoused, the people that are going in the community that are going through the struggles, that need to be asked those questions, right? What do you need, right? Because I can't go to somebody and help them if I don't know what you need. The members in our community have such a huge impact in how organizations play. And I guess my question, People USA is a peer-run agency. Up to our CEO is a peered with lived experience. And I'm talking to a lot of people down here in the city. Do you guys have these peer-run agencies and organizations that are simply just peer-run that I can do, and I'm like certified to do with a social worker that holds a master's degree? Obviously not social work, but the advocacy part of it. Being hands-in, outreach in the community, and, being given the opportunity as a peer who's lived through homelessness, mental health, and grew up in an at-risk family, being able to give back. Does that happen in the city more often than not?
I just want to add one thing as to what we want, which would be along your lines. When people come from incarceration upstate, It is outrageous that in the city, 9,000 people every year are released, half of them go to the shelter system. That is so wrong. What should be is the peer support from organizations like Fortune and others that have the experience, which is peer-to-peer in terms of support. So that would be an example if what we want to do is to change that right now, legally and by law. So that would be an example of peer-to-peer does work if you use it and you fund it.
We are a multi-million-dollar agency now, which we grew from just two little old ladies in a hospital,
But-
peers.
Others may want to answer also. That's my irritation.
Yeah, I can give a quick, did you want to go first, James?
If you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Well, you know, just as an impacted person, I think there's still a mountain that we got to cross with that, because in a lot of cases the stigmas do exist. And so I've seen in my own experience, I've been offered these little outreach jobs and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I have a better skill set than that. I could do a little more than that. So one of the things which Gail highlighted, which is the fact that Project Renewal, the same shelter that I was in, that I was reeling against in the beginning, has not hired me, but has elected me to their board of trustees. And that's like a major feat to have me actually in that type of leadership role in that organization. So one of the pushes is definitely to engage impacted people more in these different spaces, and not just have us show up at press conferences or at panel discussions. And it is happening, and I just want to cite a testament to that is the fact that first of all, I participated in the mayor's transition team to help shape his coming policies that we see implemented now. After that, he took office, and I also helped shape some of the other things, but I knew I couldn't be the only voice in there. And so what I did was I brought homeless New Yorkers into City Hall several times to actually be part of engaging the administration to help them. And these are ways that those of us who are impacted are able to be elevated to levels that are beyond just us showing up for a press conference. And
Yeah, I think you summed it up well, Shams, but I totally agree. I think that's really important to make sure that both, directly impacted folks have not only a voice in advocacy, but also in actually running and leading the programs that serve folks with similar experiences.
Sorry, one more thing. There is several groups that do center, and I gotta acknowledge them. You have Vocal New York, which is peer-led, and we gotta acknowledge them. Also Neighbors Together, Human.NYC, Picture the Homeless. So there are a few groups that are out there, and I gotta say that I'm inspired by most of them because they have been around longer than I've been in this space and stuff like that. So the idea of impacted people being involved in spaces like that and being involved in their own advocacy is very important. I'm glad you raised
Thank you. Go ahead, sir. Anybody else, you need to come to the mic if you don't mind. Go
Hi,
ahead.
my name's John. Thank you very much, all of you. I'm really interested in this idea of the narrative, and I love what you said, Shams, about the story needing a hero. And so I guess this is a bit more of a philosophical question, but I'm interested in what all of your answers are, which is, if Shams and people with lived experience are the heroes, then who is the villain in this story, and what are we all in this space doing this work? What should we be, and what are we sort of fighting against?
Who would like that one? Because we have a long list. Go ahead.
I'm gonna let y'all start.
That's a really interesting question. And I think I should also say that, I think there are probably common villains, so to speak, that all of us in this space have. I mean, the villain to me is homelessness is the biggest one, housing insecurity, the fact that there are tens of thousands of folks in the city shelter system and thousands more, living on the streets. I think in terms of the focus of specific groups and individuals, who they're targeting can be a little different. So I know that Shams mentioned, when you think about your activism, Shams, you're not really thinking about the NIMBYs are the villain, so to speak. And I think that makes sense for Shams' activism. Like, the role that, you know, a group like Open Hearts plays definitely has, you know, NIMBYs as in more of a villain role, but I wouldn't necessarily characterize it in that exact way. I think it's not the people that we're fighting against as much as the narratives, the rhetoric, the myths, and the holds that, you know, those types of ideas often have on people in power who are making decisions about policies around homelessness and about particular sites. So to me, when I think about, you know, what's Open Hearts fighting against, that's what I think we're fighting against. But I'm, interested to hear what others think.
Olivia, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, systemic racism.
There you go.
I mean, and that's something that, and you know, that comes from, you know, if you want to go even more philosophical and deeper, it comes from fear and ignorance, right? And so I feel like a lot of times that's what we're fighting in ourselves and also with each other and with the community. You know, that's why I continue to say, like, it's so important for us, especially because, as our other commenter said, you know, it's so important for the people who are directly impacted, those who are the experts, to be leading on these issues, for us to constantly be, you know, like checking ourselves and checking in and making sure that we are working out of solidarity and that we're not, because it's so easy for those of us who do have privilege and who have power and resources to sort of fall back into, you know, the ways that the system has let us, you know, think about these kinds of issues. So yeah, I would say that's a huge thing that we're fighting against. And it's the thing that, you know, once we get in conversation with the so-called NIMBYs, you know, and hear their genuine concerns and listen to them, you know, at the root of it usually is some kind of fear and concern about safety. And once we all start to understand that our safety is all bound up, like I'm not safe unless you're safe, and I'm not free unless you're free, and that our liberation is like we're bound up together, then like we can't move forward.
Thank you.
Real quick, you took my racial now, but real quick, to be honest with you, when I speak sometimes, there's always like a hidden thing that's being said. And when I spoke earlier, I spoke of how I engage people when I seen the drug use and stuff. And what I'm usually in that shelter environment, horrible congregate shelters, I'm quiet. I don't talk to nobody. I'm in and out. But in this case, I was stuck. So I couldn't leave. The pandemic came. And I'm like, yo, I can't be here like this. So what I did when we talk about villain, I looked in the mirror. And that is the challenge for all of us. It's easy to put it on somebody else, the mayor, the this, the that. But where am I at in this? And instead of looking at my fellow resident as a drug addict or as a bad person, I looked at myself and I said, how could you be the reflection of what you want to see? Not just in how I look, not just in how I talk, but in how I act. I'm not going to sit here all day and blame Project Renewal. What can I do to improve the environment? No money, nothing. I can be a better person to myself and to everybody I come into contact with. And that's the foundation for me. Just looking within and seeing the negative and turning it into a positive.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. If somebody has one more question, go ahead. Thank you.
Actually, not a question. I just wanted to thank you guys a lot.
Who are you?
My name is Basma. I work for Urban Pathways. And as someone who's been doing this work for a really long time, I understand the importance of obviously frontline staff, but also of political backing. Like I know right now, like we're struggling to get our 5.4% COLA increase for the city.
We're working on it.
Mayor Adams is ignoring us.
No, we're not. We're not.
And it's it's really hard, like doing the work when you can't hire people to do the work, and you have one person doing the job of 10 people, right? And then it really impacts us and our morale because we might not necessarily be able to give the services that we want to give, because while I'm sitting down and listening to this person speak, I'm thinking about the 20 others that I have to get to before the end of the day, the week, or whatever the case may be. So I definitely ditto what you were saying in terms of peer-led activities and peer-led work, but also those are the lowest paid. Like you said, outreach workers, the cooks, the maintenance, but we need more people who with lived experiences in higher positions and higher roles, and whatever that can be done to make that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a clap of applause for all the human service workers in the city of New York. I'm afraid that it is noon. I know you have other workshops to go to. Let's give a round of applause to this amazing panel. And not only do we need to replicate what Open Hearts is doing, but there's just all the issues, permanent housing, the legislation in Albany. People should go to peer-led opportunities when they leave incarceration, and I could go on and on. So fight for everyone and for the COLA, for the human service workers. Thank you very much.